the presentation, and we'll have a question and answer session at the end of the presentation. So thank you so much for attending, and we'll let Allison go ahead and get started. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for being here. I'm really glad that that you joined me today, and I am excited to spend the next 45 minutes or so with you talking about how do we create holidays that allow our family to thrive. So I will just give a brief introduction of who I am. I'm Allison Douglas, as Sue mentioned. I am the Resource Center program director at Harmony Family Center. We primarily serve families who have adopted from foster care across the state of Tennessee. However, I also have some other roles. I work on a federal grant that covers post-permanency. So that's post-adoption or after a child returns home, after foster care or is in guardianship services across the country. And so I do work with varying states and tribal nations on connecting and creating programs that meet the needs of children who have spent time in the custody of the state. I also am a parent. I'm an adoptive parent of 4 kids. Most of my children have some sort of diagnosed special needs. They range all over the map to I have a son with autism, children who qualify for IEP under the emotional disturbance category. Some of my kids are no longer in school, and they've also had diagnoses as well. And so I'm bringing this topic to you today, not just as someone who works in the area of families with children who have a higher level of need, but also as a parent who does this work every day. And the work changes as your children get older. Certainly, the holidays look different for me with teenagers and young adults than they did when they were 4. And yet there are still ways that I have to look at the holidays a little bit differently than maybe my friends who have more neurotypical or typically developing children. For me, when I began my life as a parent, I came from a family with very non-traditional holidays. And so my way of rebelling against that is I wanted to do the holidays like I'd seen it on TV. I wanted to make the turkey. I wanted my kids to be wearing matching outfits. I wanted it all. And that's how I attempted to create the holidays when I first became a parent. What I really discovered was that my life and life inside my families looked more like something from Elf than from Father Knows Best or It's a Wonderful Life. And that's because kids impacted by disabilities are more likely to be closer to Buddy the Elf. They can be overwhelmed and easily dysregulated and also intensely excited and full of wonder. And so I definitely had some very rough holidays early in my parenting life. And this training actually came directly from that experience. And so I want to just spend some time today thinking about how can we as parents really address the needs of our kids so that our children don't feel like they ruined our lives and crammed 7 cookies into the VCR, right? We want this to be a time of connection, of joy, of peace, and we want the holidays to be something memorable and not for the chaos. So I want to first pause before I give you some of these tips to really just be honest about something that I don't think we say enough or get told enough. And that is that research consistently shows that parenting children with special needs comes with a higher risk of emotional exhaustion, pressure, even depression, um, especially during times like the holidays. And it's not because, as families or as parents, we aren't doing enough. It's because the demands are very real. And then you add on top of the demands of parenting the children that you parent, you add that expectations increase, routines change, sensory input is everywhere. I ran into TJ Maxx this morning and I could not wait to get out. I am, for the most part, a typically developing person and a neurotypical person. And just the amount of noise and lights was too much. And honestly, often the support that we need and rely on during the holidays is shifting. And so, if the holidays feel hard for you in your home, if your kid struggles more, if you feel more worn out, if you want it to look picture perfect and it doesn't, that makes sense. And there is nothing wrong with you. There is nothing wrong with your family. And very importantly, your holidays don't have to be perfect in order to be remembered and meaningful and special. They don't have to look like everyone else's. What matters the most is that you and your child feel safety, connection, that you are doing what you need to do, what works for you and your child and your family, and that you're allowed to create holidays that meet your family where you are. I really want you to know that I'm not here to just give you some strategies and go, all right, now make it work. Because honestly, these 10 tips aren't rules, right? They're options. You don't have to do any of them or all of them. But I want you to create some time for you and your family that feels good. And sometimes just choosing one of these strategies that reduces stress can make a really meaningful difference for you and for your kids. So let's look at the first tip for a peaceful holiday season. You know, holidays often bring up a lot of grief. Um, and that is not just for children, it can be for everyone. But even children experience grief. I mentioned before a lot of the work that I have done professionally and personally is with children who are adopted or have spent time in foster care. There is a lot of grief that comes along with having those experiences. And we know that all children, but especially children with special needs, experience grief in ways that come out as behavior. It does not come out in the child saying, this feels weird. I feel unsettled. I am missing grandma. It comes out in hyperactivity and never feeling satisfied or satiated, in seeking sensory input to calm the body. And so we're going to look at a couple of ways that we can cope with grief with our children or with ourselves. So one is just being honest. We we need to talk in age appropriate ways about what is happening with our children. My children, I have an older child who is a young adult in their 20s who has a significant number of mental health concerns. And right now, that child is not doing well at all. And so they don't live in town. Their siblings haven't seen them in a long time. I haven't seen them in a long time. When I do see and hear from them, it's often in crisis situations. And there's a lot of grief there that this child was not able to create the life that they wanted, that the world is not always friendly to folks with mental health challenges. Um, and then simply the grief of like, I miss having my kid home at Christmas. My children miss having them home. And very recently, one of my other kids had brought out some family photos and was looking at them and said, you know, I've really been thinking a lot about my brother. I've been thinking about him a lot. And that was really shocking to me because they'd not said a word about that. They'd said nothing to me about it. Something I have noticed, this kid's behaviors have been escalated. Their depression and anxiety has been escalated. They've been having trouble staying focused at school, right? This all makes sense. And so we needed to bring some age appropriate honesty into this discussion and just say, hey, let me talk to you a little bit more about what's going on here. So this can be the truth about folks who are not in your life anymore. This can be true about situations where you are maybe going through a divorce or a separation, or there are family challenges where you're not interacting with certain members of your family for a million reasons. Grief can be a big cause of challenging behaviors. And so bringing out that age appropriate honesty, just saying, hey, I got it. Doing things like life booking, going back to those family photos. Life books are often talked about in the context of children who don't live with their family of origin. But these can also be used with any child to say, like, let's go back and look. Let's look at the photos of when you were sitting in grandma's lap, even though we miss her. We can look back at these photos of Christmases when the parents were living together and say, like, let's talk about this. Let's reminisce, right? The goal isn't to fix the sadness for our child, but to really make space for it so that it doesn't come out in these sideways behaviors that make life more challenging. Creating new traditions or memorials. So later that night, my husband and I were talking about the sort of changes we'd seen in our kids' behavior and in some of the ways that they were responding to normal holiday things. And I was like, this is something we used to do. I think it's time to bring back this tradition of if there are people who cannot join us in the holidays, we're going to do some kind of memorial for them. So it might be we put a candle at the place they typically sit at the table. It might be that we just mention their name and say, gosh, we really care about this person. It might be that we look at a picture, have our child draw a picture of that person and maybe our wishes for them on the holiday. If it is appropriate and there is a way to do this, can the child have contact with some of the people who may not be regularly in their lives? Journaling or drawing, again, we can't fix our kids' grief, but we can say, this is normal. I'm going to give you some space to feel it, and here are some ways we can deal with it. And honestly, sometimes the holidays bring the type of stress that means we might need to up our therapeutic interventions. If we've been having therapy twice a month, we may need to move to having it weekly during this time. And I know that can be really hard, but it may be that we're like, yep, we're going to have to cut the school day a little bit short to get into therapy, right? Because while we want our child to be in all their instructional time, if they are in a place where they're not doing well and they need that therapeutic intervention, right? They may not be getting what they need at school anyway. And so the holidays can be a time that grief really comes up for ourselves, but also for our children. And so let's create some ways, some strategies to help them cope with that. You know, holiday gatherings often come with big pressure to hug, kiss, socialize, perform, to really be on. And for kids with sensory sensitivities or children with social challenges, for children with mental health conditions, that forced interaction can feel really uncomfortable. It can not only feel uncomfortable, it can actually make the brain move into a place where it's like, this is threatening. And when our brain is moving up that arousal continuum to a place of threat, our brains don't know, is it just an internal threat, or am I being chased, right? Our brains and bodies react as if our lives were actually threatened or in danger. And so, what we want to do as parents is to really give our kids permission. And sometimes it's not even about the kids. Sometimes the kids don't really care at all. Honestly, my child never felt strange about not being socially active during the holidays. I was the one that had feelings of guilt or exclusion around that. And so it's okay to let your child observe instead of participate. It's okay to not attend everything that you are invited to or that you need to attend. Those connections happen when kids feel safe, not when they feel pushed to perform. And so you can support those relational interactions. If Aunt Kathy wants a hug, you can say, we don't really do hugs, we do fist bumps, we do high fives. It makes Michael uncomfortable when he has to give a hug. So he would rather just wave at you, but he does know who you are, or he talks about you, or if he doesn't, he's glad to see you, right? Support those interactions, but don't force it, because forcing them can create that anxiety and agitation that's really going to move this kid into a place of self-preservation, not a place of peace. You know, we also want to create that place of safety and predictability for our children. Predictability lowers anxiety. Anytime we know what's going to happen next, we are much more likely to be in a state of calm. Um, Keeping routines when it's possible, or explaining as well as possible any changes ahead of time, can help our kids feel more in control. And again, I've been doing this for, gosh, my almost 20 years, parenting kids with special needs. And I always approach this by saying, you know, predictability helps our kids to feel safe. It also helps us to feel safe. Not that we are consciously aware of it, but keeping up with our daily routines can often create that sense of um, calm in our body, of like, I know what's next. I know that this is going to happen, but I'm going to have my coffee first. I know that there is going to be chaos, and there will be stuff all over the house for the next 2 weeks while my children are at home, but my bedroom, the bed will still be made. And I know I can take a step in there and have a breath when I need to. Whatever that might be for you. I was a 46-year-old bed maker. I never made my bed until I was late in my 40s. But now, as a part of my daily routine, It just helps me to stay on task, to know that no matter what happens, I'm going to come into my room. It's going to look like this. I can sit on this bed and watch Law and Order and feel good about it. And so creating those predictable routines for both you and your child can really settle some of that stress. Already talked about that first bullet point, maintaining those routines, creating visual schedules. Some kids need those all year round. Other kids don't. I had some children that needed a more high structure schedule system. I had other kids that really didn't. But during the holidays, they all needed to know what was next because, in my mind, and honestly, I think in their mind, they're like, these are going to be long, lazy days. We're just going to hang out in our pajamas. We're going to enjoy the school break. But what would happen is with all of that unstructured time, they'd start to get really squirrely. They would feel out of control. They would get anxious about what's next. Time either seemed to go by really quickly or really drag. And so we followed this third bullet point. We minimized unstructured time without over scheduling the day. I didn't want to overschedule the day and feel like I had to drive my children from one task to the next. But if it just was like a fully unstructured day, it was total chaos in my house. So this is actually, this is probably from maybe 6, 7 years ago. And this was a schedule on a Thursday during Christmas break. I remember it very clearly, winter break. And this was what I made up for the kids every day. I would say, this is what's for lunch. This is what's for dinner. Here are the snacks that we laid out. We're going to do some kind of activity, and who's going to be home today? Because that would change from day to day. Sometimes dad would be home. Sometimes mom would be home. Sometimes we'd have grandparents visiting. And just knowing this for the whole week was so helpful. I would just do that top part for the whole week. And then usually day by day or a couple days ahead of time, I would do the more hour by hour, minute by minute schedule. And again, I wanted that to be flexible so that they could move in and out of it, right? If we weren't eating snack at exactly 10 o'clock, that's okay. But it gave us a time to say, like, I know there will be snack. You already know what it is. And we're going to sit down and do it during this time. The holidays are a time for co-regulation. So many of our kids cannot maintain self-regulation on their own. And so they really need you, your calm voice, your calm presence, your calm body to help them settle. And this is true even as our children get older. And that's not a failure of independence, right? Self-regulation is a developmental need. And so we will often need for our kids who maybe have lagging developmental skills or who have special needs or specific diagnoses to really be with them as a part of their self-regulation and to maintain our own regulation. Now, listen, it's easy for me to say that right here in my office when all of my children are doing the things that they're doing, and my phone's on silent, so I won't even see it if I get a call from the school. It's very easy for me to maintain my regulation. I know that's not true when you're in the moment. It is not easy to maintain your self-regulation when your mother-in-law is coming over and your kids just trashed the room that you have just cleaned and they are ripping open presents and it's not the time yet. It is so much harder to co-regulate, and it's still needed. Both things are true. I love this quote from Dr. Perry because this is not just about kids that have special needs or kids with disabilities or kids that spent time in the child welfare system. This is true of all children. Don't underestimate how important it is for children to know their caretakers are in control. This doesn't mean that we are drill sergeants, that we're barking orders. What it means is that we are a safe, stable base that they can come to and we can say, yep, let me help you. It is frightening for all children, but particularly traumatized children, children with neurodevelopmental needs, to sense that the people caring for them are themselves disorganized, confused, and anxious. It's a big ask for us as parents. And what I think it means is that we don't have to be perfect. What we can do is give ourselves a break. Give ourselves a big break during these hectic times and say, you know what? I don't have to create a perfect dinner. There are so many times during these busy times of the year, and the holidays are always one of them, where I'm like, I am not making dinner. We are going to have basically all snacks for dinner time, right? I'm going to put out just a ton of stuff I know my kids like and will eat. They can make their plate. We call it party trays. And I'm like, guess what we're having for dinner tonight? We're having party trays. Sometimes I literally even go to Kroger and buy the pepperoni and cheese party trays that are available because I don't want to feel anxious, disorganized, like I don't have it at least together enough to go like, yes, I know what we're going to do for dinner. I'm not going to make you wait. Um, and that doesn't mean you're not being a good parent. What it means is that you are using the capacity and the resources that you have in the moment really wisely. Our fifth tip for the holidays is just be really mindful of transitions. Transitions are almost always hard for children who have developmental delays, special needs, have a history of trauma. They are especially hard during the holidays because we are asking for a ton of transitions for our children. We're leaving one house, we're having a meal at somebody else's house, and that meal may not include foods that your kid will eat. We are doing things like opening presents. We are being asked to stay out late or go somewhere early or go to a new home or location our children have never been to. Transitions are very dysregulating to the central nervous system. And so what we want to do is think about how can we make these transitions as simple as possible. So we can go back to that predictability. Let's tell kids what's happening and what is expected. I remember going with, this is when all four of my children were young. A family friend invited us to go to a holiday dinner at a kind of nice restaurant. And they really wanted the children to come. And so I knew that this was going to be different for. All right, so we want to talk to our kids about what's going to happen, visual schedules. We talked about that. Using a timer or a countdown app. One of the things that I've done is thinking about times that my kids have maybe needed to not be on the computer so late. I moved from saying like it's time to be off to putting some sort of countdown timer on it so the computer does it, and being like, yep, it's time now, right? The computer is telling you, it's saying you have 3 more minutes. Other ways we can make transitions easier are using things like transitional movements. All right, guys, we are going to go to grandma's house. How are we going to get out the door today? Are we going to skip? Are we going to jump? It's great for younger children. For my older children, I would often play basically a transition song, play the song. By the time that I'd start the song, they'd know, okay, we got to go out to the car. By the time it was over, we'd be out into the car. And using physical cues, right? Like that. Music or lighting. Just we started turning down the lights so that the kids know, like, it's time to go to the next activity. It's time to move to the next activity. So having that, um, those transitions in mind can really make them less challenging, but also can add that predictability factor to them. We also have to search for those sensory solutions. There is so much sensory overload during the holidays. The lights, the sounds, just smells, new stuff, just bringing out the Christmas tree. Actually, my kids always had behavioral challenges, like putting up the Christmas tree was the worst, because they would always start acting out. And so just thinking about how I even did that shifted over time. So even now, I brought out my Christmas tree last weekend. I brought out one box of ornaments at a time instead of filling up the whole house with like all this stuff. Put on the back porch, brought it in from the outside storage, put it on the back porch. I'd go out and bring in one box at a time. So when we are meeting sensory needs, we aren't spoiling our kids or letting them get away with something. What we're doing is really supporting their regulation. We are supporting their ability to maintain that regulation. One of the things that I loved to do was create a sensory bug out bag. One year I was looking for something for my dad for Christmas. He's very hard to shop for. And I saw on Amazon this idea of a bug out bag. And a bug out bag is a portable kit that contains all the items that you need to survive for 72 hours if you are evacuating from a disaster. And I was like, oh my gosh, I need a sensory bug out bag for my kids. I need this bunch of tools that I can use to help them when we're going to be in places that they can't have their normal sensory needs met. And so when we think about creating that bug out bag, think about all the ways you can meet their sensory needs. One of my children was super, and still is to some degree, but he's 20 and he's able to really regulate or just ask not to go to those places anymore. But he was very dysregulated by certain smells. And so for years, he bought these little scented hand sanitizers and smells he did like that he would kind of rub on his hands and sniff to get to mitigate other smells that he was grossed out by. So put things in there that help in every sensory area. What can they do that smells good? What can they have to look at? This is just a water timer, a little bubble timer that you see this kid holding. And this, again, was something that we used in our bug out bag for years. You can have things like headphones to block out noise, fidgets to keep fingers busy so they're not plucking at the Christmas tree or reaching out to touch a candle on the menorah, something to keep their hands busy. Sound also was one that was very challenging for many of my children. My son, I mentioned, who is 20, actually told me the other day, he said, I realized that open floor plan houses are terrible for my sensory issues. 20 years old, right? He's had years of like understanding and learning about how to articulate and meet his own needs. And he just realized we had spent so many holidays in our family members' open floor plan house where he lost his mind on the regular because it was just so overwhelming. And so think about like, what can we do to help with that? How can we make this easier? And we can tell our family members this is what it needs to happen in order for us to be here, right? It is not because the child is rude. It is not because they're spoiled. This is what they need in order to make the holidays work. You can have foods that are helpful for them. Crunchy and chewy foods are really helpful for sensory regulation. Things like beef jerky, gum, anything like chips or things that are crunchy, crackers can be helpful. And these are really simple tools that can help our kids stay alert or present, that can help them to be regulated in their sensory realms. Things like a seat that they can sit in, a wobble stool. I don't remember what these were called Dynadiscs, the blue one here. My kids had those and they sat on them for every meal when they would have to stay at the table. Very helpful. Using something like a weighted lap pad during the meal or while the child has to wait for the meal, or just packing them whatever foods they need and letting them eat before the meal if they're hungry, right? These are things that can sometimes prompt our friends or relatives to make commentary. And I was just like, this is how it has to be. Like, if you want us here, he's going to need to eat before 2 o'clock because he's hungry. And that's triggering for this child. So thinking about how can we meet our kids' sensory needs in unfamiliar environments. It's also important for us to remember that even really minor stressors can trigger someone who already has a very sensitive stress response system. Um, Kids with mental health issues often have a very sensitive stress response system. Kids with trauma, children on the autism spectrum often have a very sensitized stress response system. And even very small stressors, like being asked to wait 30 minutes to eat, can really push them into a place of dysregulation. And so what I want you to do, and what I'm asking myself to do as I move closer to the holidays with my own family, is to not assume malintent, to not just assume, okay, this kid just doesn't want to cooperate. They want to do what they want to do right now. That there's not malintent, that this is a child who is stressed beyond their capacity in the moment. What we can do is shift from that "why are you doing this" mindset, which, listen, you're going to have those moments. You're going to have those moments no matter what kind of parent you are, no matter what kind of child you are parenting. You're going to have moments when you're like, why are you doing this to me? But what we want to do is really mindfully shift from what is it that you actually need right now so that we can respond more effectively. Now, I said all of that to let you know, yep, your kids may not, it is likely that they do not have bad intent for their behaviors, and the impact of our kids' behaviors isn't the same as the intent, right? So many kids, especially kids with higher level needs, they're not trying to ruin the holiday. Their behavior is driven by stress. Their intent is to just survive. It's not to hurt you. However, and this is really important for us to internalize as parents, the impact to us is still real, right? You can understand your child's nervous system response and still feel sad that the day didn't go the way you wanted it. You can feel empathy and still need more support. You can feel exhausted and know, hey, my child's just having a sensory meltdown. Those things are still very real. So Mr. Rogers says what is mentionable is manageable. If you can find even one person that you can just text or call or make eye contact with, that's like, good grief, I am so exhausted. I know my child is doing the best they can do right now. And the impact is so very real, right? It means that you too need your needs met, right? We're not blaming our child, but that we also deserve those moments of peace and joy during the holidays. So I invite you, if you don't have that person in mind right now, take the rest of this week and think about, like, who can be my go to? Who can I say, this is hard? I know my kid's doing the best they can. I'm not mad at them. I also just need to say, it's a lot at this moment. And if you don't have that person, I'm going to put my email in the chat, or one of the folks on the call can put my email in the chat. I know there are several that know it. Feel free to drop me an email. We need those people to just go, it is challenging. It's hard. Closing in on our last few tips. Practice saying no. It's 100% okay to say no. It's okay to say no to events, to traditions, to expectations that are protecting your child's nervous system. That's your job, to protect your child. Setting boundaries with other people is a form of self-care. And so you do not have to have a Christmas morning that looks like this one. This would make my children, even at 16, 17, 20, and 24, lose it. This is too much. This would make me upset. And I think I would lose it if there was all of this. We don't even bring out the gifts until Christmas morning. And that came about because of my own anxiety. I was a very anxious child. I was the child who'd see presents under the tree. I would find a knife or a razor blade and open it and look at it and tape it back together, because the anxiety of knowing, like, there's this thing right here. I cannot, until I know what that is, I cannot focus. I cannot rest. And I was like, I always thought I was just a bad kid, but as an adult, I really realized, hey, it would have been very different if we just didn't put those under the tree until it was time to unwrap them. I still looked forward to Christmas. My children still look forward to Christmas. We just did not have things under the tree, or we would put things that actually it was okay to play with under the tree. So things like, Christmas books I would put under the tree. Toys that I'd bought with a Christmas theme that they could just play with at any point, right? But those were special because they'd only come out at Christmas time in our family. So just remember, it's okay to say no. It's okay to skip events. Prioritize what your child needs over your own expectations or what you think others expect from you, right? It's okay to take your Christmas picture in flip-flops if that's what you need to do. It's okay to go to your holiday faith tradition service in clothing that's not exactly like everyone else's, for or your children to do that. It may mean, yes, you need to adjust your plans or let go of things, and that can be challenging and hard. And it's okay. Just look at that picture. That is my family one year. Yeah, that was our Christmas picture because that's what I could get from them. And while I have to admit I was disappointed in the moment, looking back at that, probably a good 7 or 8 years later, I actually find it really sweet. They were doing their best. I was doing my best, and we made it through with a lot of good memories. You're allowed to redesign the holidays. Your traditions can be quieter, simpler, shorter, totally different, or in some ways, you can just ditch them for this year. Come back to it when you have the ability to do it, or when your child has the ability, or if they won't, it can come back when your children are adults. Or you can decide this is not what's important to me anymore. What matters the most isn't doing it right. It's creating moments where you and your kids feel safe, understood, and loved. This was our Christmas tree one year. I had zero capacity to do any of it. And so we bought a little Christmas tree at the grocery store. And actually, our family ended up going to the beach that Christmas. And it was just because I had run out of capacity. And so we created a new expectation and a new tradition. And my children actually really enjoyed that. They talked about writing in the sand the year and our beach Christmas tree. They were older. They couldn't have done that when they were in elementary school, though. They were all in actually high school or middle school when we did that. So know that, yes, you can make up your own traditions. You can, this is a picture of a Renaissance fair. Our family went to the Renaissance fair for Mother's Day for many years because Mother's Day was so triggering for my kids. Just be flexible. Think about, what does my child need? What can I let go? How can I make this feel good for all of us? And then how can I get my needs met in some other way? Maybe I have a friend take me out to the service that I want to go to that I know my kids can't make it through. Maybe I go with my parenting partner out to a special dinner because it's not something we get to do, and family is in town, and maybe they do have the capacity to take care of our children for one night. It is okay to do things differently in order to make it work for your family. I want you to remember, and frankly, I'm saying this more to myself than to anyone who's on the call. Um, Beautiful is not the same as perfect. Yep, perfect means things go off without a hitch. Um, Sometimes that doesn't happen. Sometimes it doesn't happen during the holidays. Sometimes it doesn't happen during a webinar. And while not perfect, um, the time that you spend with your family or the time that we have gotten to spend together today, still pretty beautiful. We got to reflect. We got to think about how we can do things differently. Um, we have permission to really get our own needs met. It is not selfish to need your own night, to celebrate in a way that works for you if it is not a way that your family can celebrate together. And so as we get closer to Christmas, gosh, today is the second day of Hanukkah, I think. Beautiful doesn't have to be perfect. It can still be beautiful in a way that you have reimagined and redesigned for the children that you have and the family that you have in this moment. So I know we've reached our time. We definitely would have had time for questions. I still have a moment. So if anybody would like to ask questions, I'm happy to do so. Um, and I also will, as I said, put my email in the chat so that I can answer any of your questions by email.
I went ahead and put it in there for you in
Great,
the
thank
chat box.
you.
And it looks like you have somebody who's typing away. So
Okay, great.
I'm just going to kind of give them a minute and just say, Allison, we really appreciate that. I really like the bug out bags. I have done that for younger kids, but it's never something that's really occurred to me to do for older. So that's a great tip. I really like that.
Yeah. I actually let my older kids just bug out. Now that I have kids that can be by themselves, I'm like, we drive two cars. We did this at Thanksgiving. We drove two cars and we had a safe word. And when my kid was done, and he's 20, when he was done, he texted me the word and I was like, can I have 5 minutes? And he said, I need to go now. Yep, we're out, right? So how do you help a child? Will you read me the question? It won't
How do you
come up
help
on my
a
screen.
child who fixates on things told them that are happening later in the day? All they can do
Yes.
is fixate on the activity or the
Got it.
plan, but have hours until it actually happens.
I wonder if for that child, you might need to reveal the plan just a little at a time, right? So maybe depending on how old I could see myself making a calendar like this for one of my kids where it had a little peep door where they looked under and I'm like, let's go see what's next. It's going to be about 15 minutes, right? That way there's not many hours to fixate. That can be hard. And I think also sometimes it is it is the surrender to like, yep, it is going to happen. It's going to happen in 4 more hours. This is the way I used to tell my kid, that's 4 episodes of SpongeBob. That's how long that is. That felt long to him. So even thinking about how do I surrender to like just getting them the information in a way that actually makes more sense to them.
Great. There's a question, is there the ability to listen to this again or share it with a family? The answer to that is yes. It may be a little while before we get it on our website, but I can send out the website that we do post a recording of that.
And Sue, I believe I have a handout. So I will look around in my files for that handout. If I find that, I will email it to you and you can forward it on to anybody that registered for the thing today.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions, thoughts? Okay, I don't think so. Allison, I always enjoy listening to you. And you, as always, you do it very gracefully. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your information and just toughing it through because that was a tough thing, but you did a wonderful job as
That's
always. So
life, isn't
thank you
it?
so much.
You take what you're given.
All right.
Thank you
Well, we do have
guys.
another training coming up in February, and it will be the second February of February, of the second Monday, excuse me, of February. And I'm looking at a calendar to give you that time. It'd be right around the 9th of February. So have a wonderful holiday season. And again, thank you for coming.